People either live from probability, which is really just called the past, what evidence they have of the past, or possibility, which is in the present moment, what is possible. Or what mattered is that I knew enough to say, this is me losing my power all of a sudden, trying to meet the right person who can do it for me. No one can do it for you. My word for and my paradigm for how to manifest is through a Jewish lens. And Judaism is really different with what we would call the law of reception.
I've never heard of the word law of reception. What the hell is that? Guys, we have a very special treat. We have one of my favorite ladies on the podcast today. Her name is Cathy Heller. She's actually the reason that I even have a podcast.
I love that.
Right?
That's the best.
It's true.
It is.
Cathy and I went for coffee maybe, 4 or 5 years ago. And Cathy said to me, I don't even know what we were talking about. What were we talking about?
Our careers and what's next. And I'm like, this is so you. All you have to do is talk. And it's not just that you talk and have interesting things to say, which you do. You're so loving and you're so enthusiastic that people like talking to you. And I was like, you should totally have a podcast. It'd be like it's the easiest medium that God ever made for you. And then you did it.
And I didn't even thank you. I thank you for that beautiful intro.
That's
I should be
true.
doing you a beautiful. I have an intro
Okay.
for you, but that's a great one. I'm going to keep it. As usual, I say to Cathy that she is like molasses. She can just she pours sugar, sweetness on everybody.
I feel like you do that for me. You're one of like 5 people that always tells me how proud you are of me. Like no matter what, we've been friends for a long time.
Many years.
And it's just like this like very beautiful, generous heart. Like most people have like a competitive vibe.
Yeah,
I
true.
feel like you and I are just like so happy to see each other just like in your light, thriving. And you do that for me.
Thank you.
Always.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that's a great segue into what I was going to say about you because you're right. I'm very proud of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cathy okay. I don't even know where to begin. So Cathy is very talented, and it's true that where you've come from where you were is extraordinary.
Same. Thank you.
This girl, when you say habits and hustle, the word hustle personified. The funny thing is, if you know Cathy and her work and what she does, she's all about like I said, like sugar and sweet and manifestation and abundance. Her new book, of course, is called Abundant Ever After. Of course, she's that girl who typically, I'm not into that like woo,
I know.
like be present and all that kind of thing. But you do it like that. But inside, you are the most resourceful.
So resourceful.
Such a driven, ambitious soul. And what you've done and how you've kind of evolved and elevated over the last God knows how many years I've known you is literally astounding.
That's so incredibly kind. I fully receive it. I feel like I'm getting like electricity running through me, just being in your presence and hearing all of those nice things. And it is really special when someone's known you the whole journey because you see the person continue to reach for who they really are. And it's really cool. And I've watched you do that too. And that's really amazing. I think one of the reasons, and we'll talk about it today, why I get away with that with you, like the manifestation-ish sort of spiritual, like the ease of the flow rather than the pushing is because I think from where it comes and you understand on some level, there's like a sincerity to it with me of what it really means to me. And I'm going to explain it to you so that your listeners hear it. But my word for and my paradigm for how to manifest is through a Jewish lens. And Judaism is really different with what we would call the law of reception, which is what Rabbi Aaron says that's like really Jewish, than probably what's out there in the zeitgeist about most of what people hear about the law of attraction. That's not as much a Jewish concept as the law of reception. And I'm happy to like go into why they're different. But I think that's why, because you know me and because you're also really good at spotting if it's like bullshit or if it's real, we come from that same DNA, truly. Like we're part of the Jewish people. And so there's something about it that feels actually grounded to you. And I'm happy to like explain why I think Judaism has an amazing lens on manifestation.
Good, because I was going to say,
Good.
I love that because the first question I was actually going to ask you is when I was looking at the bio that I guess your team sent me, it says here, okay, Cathy is a renowned teacher, podcaster, and author. She hosts one of the top spiritual podcasts, which is one reason why I would never have her on if it wasn't for you.
Right?
Abundant Ever After, which is the name of the book, which has been downloaded 45 million times. I'm talking like that's insanity. And it says here, she's a practitioner of the law of reception and has a deep understanding of the universal principles of manifestation. I've never heard of the word law of reception before. And the first question I was going to say is, what the hell is that?
Okay. So here's the cool thing. So when I was 21, I went to Israel. I was supposed to be there for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Great. I graduated from college, go to Israel for 3 weeks, and then go into my life. Instead, I met Rabbi Aaron. I was so compelled by the depth that he offered. I just kept extending my trip, and I stayed for 3 years. And in those 3 years, I feel like something hit Control-Alt-Delete on the software program, which was how I saw the world, and inserted in me like new software, to which allowed me to like see the universe through the eyes of Judaism, which was unbelievably expansive.
Wow.
Like growing up, I knew Judaism was like lox and bagels and Mel Brooks. And it's like, I like Mel Brooks and I like lox and bagels, but there's so much more to it. And Rabbi Aaron said to me at some point in those 3 years, he said, I feel like everyone's into the law of attraction. Have you heard of it? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like the thing everyone's talking about. He's like, I just want to share with you, like, if you're in a conversation like that, I want you to know the Jewish take on it. I'm like, sure. So he's like, we would say the law of reception. I'm like, what is that? He's like, well, the word Kabbalah comes from the word lekabel. Kabbalah means to receive. So it's the law of reception. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, if you had a radio and you put the radio in this room right now, and this isn't woo, this is reality. If you put the radio in this room, you'd turn it on, and all of a sudden you would hear something. You might hear music, right? You might hear static, but you'll hear something. He's like, so let's say you hear music. Where was the music before you turned it on? And I'm like, I've never thought of that question, but it's a fair question. He's like, the answer is it was hidden in plain sight. It's here. It's already in escrow. But in order to hear it, you have to tune the receiver to a frequency that can actually receive the music. And so he said, most people go through their life pointing at the music, so to speak, of their life. This is my reality. This is my relationship. This is my health. This is my bank account. Not realizing that they're choosing what station they're hearing based on their vibration. And Einstein, right? Like this is again, not woo, this is just science, said that the world is not really made of 3 dimensions, but we perceive 3D with our naked eye because the eyeball sees things in cubes. It sees things in 3 dimensions. But the truth is that atoms are 99% energy and 1% particle. So most of the world in reality is something we don't perceive with our eyes, but it exists. It's 99% of the world, 99% of atoms are energy. So it's a frequency, which is why Malcolm Gladwell says in Blink, when someone walks in a room, within 4 seconds, you feel their energy. You just know if this person is net positive, net neutral, net negative, because the energy goes first. Even my cat, like if someone walks in the space, my cat either like runs under the bed or is like kind of intrigued by this person. Babies can feel energy. You and I can feel energy. We know that if you sit down with someone and have coffee, the most impressive thing is not what they're wearing, it's their energy. It's like, you have great energy. I feel like the reason people like being around you, you happen to be stunning. It's your energy. Your energy brings people to life. Your energy is like bubbles that are boiling water that turn everything on. That's your energy. That's your greatest offer to the world. So Rabbi Aaron said, we have to understand that like we are vibrational beings. And when we're truly in flow, when we're truly in alignment with our soul, not our ego, but our soul, then the music is on and everything is like beautiful music. And then our life is just like that. And then the synchronicity kind of takes over because what goes first is you're in the music. You have the vibration that like everybody wants to be around. So it becomes a magnet for stuff.
So I guess my question to you is, how does somebody change their energy? If you are born or have a certain energy,
Yeah.
right? Or frequency, how do you elevate it? If you are somebody who has bad energy or a low frequency, is that even possible in your opinion?
I mean, first of all, it's a really good question. And when I left Israel, I moved to Los Angeles, and I started taking classes at the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA, and I studied there for a few years, and I started studying meditation, which was super hard for me at first.
Oh,
And then I wound up learning what meditation really is, which is, this is a long way to answer your question, but it's how I would answer it. Meditation is not about not thinking. Meditation is about witnessing your thinking. When I met John Kabat-Zinn, when I've gone to Joe Dispenza's workshops, anyone who teaches meditation is helping you to get out of the swirling blizzard of your thoughts and perceive them, witness those thoughts, because consciousness is actually not even in the brain. I just had dinner with my friend, Dr. Lisa Miller, who's a professor at Columbia, who studies the awakened brain, brains that have like a spiritual flow state, brains that connect to something transcendent. And she said they did an fMRI on a monk and there was no activity in the brain. Here's what I mean. Most of the time, we are unconscious, thinking the same thing we thought yesterday, which makes us feel what we felt yesterday. We know that every thought secretes a hormone or a chemical like cortisol or dopamine or serotonin. And we are unconsciously living the same thoughts and the same feelings, which make us then do the same things we did the day before. So how do we change our energy? First of all, understanding, instead of being in the blizzard of the mind, it's kind of like if it was Christmas morning and it's snowing outside, if you were in the living room looking at a snowstorm, it's actually beautiful. But if you're out in the blizzard, walking through the blizzard, it sucks. It's cold. You can't see in front of you 4 feet. That's being caught in the mind. So you've done a lot of podcasts. I've done almost 1,000 podcasts. Everybody I interview who's living their best life, feeling really good, and you said how to change your feeling good, is doing some version of some practice that gets them out of the cortisol addiction. That could be working out for some people. That could be meditating for some people. There's something they do so they don't just sit in the unconscious all day long. So when you say, how do you change your energy? Well, most people, first of all, become conscious that you're unconscious a lot of the time. You're just scrolling your phone and taking in a lot of like ick, right? We have to remember we get to decide. I say to people, the same way you select what you're going to wear today, select how you want to feel. And when I teach people how to meditate now, I teach them like a 5-minute meditation that, first of all, what you first do is like notice your body first. Is your body regulated or dysregulated? You're either betraying yourself or you're not. It's that simple. And you will notice, oh my God, I'm actually like racing, right? I tell people, look out at nature. Do you see a tree that's rushing? Do you see like, animals that are worrying and serious? No, they're in flow state. They're in homeostasis, right? You're not. You're in fight or flight. The amygdala is constantly putting you in fight or flight. So first, notice your body, like attend to your body and maybe notice your sit bones and like, can you feel your left or your right? Can you distribute your weight so you feel them both? Okay, that's the first step. Now, can you notice your thoughts with non-judgmental awareness? Like, oh, I'm thinking about my mother-in-law. I'm thinking about my weight loss. Oh, I'm mad at myself. It's like, what if you could just have some distance from your thoughts? And then the trick is, who am I really? Because I'm not my thoughts. And when you really find this center part of you, there's a part of you that has equanimity, wisdom. It has a capacity to just see for miles and miles, right? And so that's what you start to do is you start to realize you are outsourcing your well-being all day long to what's going to happen, who you'll meet at the DMV, what good thing will happen. And when I teach people to meditate and they start to feel good again, they start to feel peace and equanimity and the lightness of being and their heart open and all that, it feels so freaking good. I'm like, if you could feel that good and give yourself less cortisol in those moments, which is good for you biologically, why would you wait to maybe feel good today as opposed to like plugging in, right? That is how you start to feel better.
So it's funny because we say the same things, but we use different words,
Yeah.
and to kind of get to the same, I guess, the same
I
goal,
agree.
right? What I hear you say is people need to take action. They have to do something different than they did before
Exactly.
to change their state of being, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yes.
right? So like if it's meditation for some, like I am someone who really believes that you don't need, I can't meditate to save my life. I've tried 100 times. It doesn't work for me in that way. But what I realized over many years of like beating myself up for not being able to sit in the om position and try to feel my heart, or whatever the wording is, my meditation is going for a run,
Totally.
right? Because it quiets everything around me.
First of all, meditation has been such an abused word. That is meditation. The definition of mindfulness, right? And meditation is a byproduct of being in a state of mindful awareness, is having your own attention, right?
Right.
So a lot of monks, their meditation is making sand art. They say that an adult
it's good.
coloring book
Great.
is a form of meditation. Like, there's no such thing as beating yourself up that one version of meditation doesn't work for you. Like, I also don't want to sit and breathe in and breathe out and say a mantra. Also, the other thing that's really cool about what you and I think, are more drawn to is when people are in flow state, when Tom Petty was writing a song, let's say, he's in a meditation. Because what they've come to find out from the science of the brain is like when you're in a creative flow, you are in the present moment, right? You and I are not people that overthink things. I don't sit and try to figure out the ROI, what's going to happen. Like, let's just take action. Let's just go. And guess what? Then my whole life is like a meditation because I'm in the present moment, having fun now, not saying, well, I'll only have fun if this gets 15,000 downloads or if somebody, it's like, no. I don't even know if this idea is going to work, but I want to test it. I want to create. I want to keep going. That's what nature is doing all the time.
Yeah, because analysis paralysis kills every dream and every possibility, right? Because
Totally.
you sit in this like terrible place of like, is it not going to work? Is it maybe going to work? I agree. So that's like the first thing. But you have something that's very interesting to me, and I just realized it as you were talking, right? Because very few people, like you have people who are very hardcore in business or hardcore in creative.
Yeah.
Very rarely do people have both sides of the brain working so well together.
It's true.
You are somebody, that's what I think I'm really, I've always been I admire it, and I find it's very impressive. Let me just give you some background, because I know like I said all those like buzzwords like podcaster, teacher. She's telling you she's a meditation teacher. She's not. I mean, she might be now, but she wasn't, okay? So when I met Cathy was a struggling artist, like a music artist, who was exceptionally talented. You were dropped from your record label, right?
Yep.
So she was a singer-songwriter, and I was obsessed with your stuff.
Home to me, you're home to me.
Remember? Oh, okay. First of all, her voice, she's exceptionally talented. And by the way, I do like kind of blow smoke up people's ass sometimes.
You're one of three people that listen to my CD all the time.
But I will say
when CDs were a thing.
I am not just making this shit up. And you can ask Noah that I would put your CD in my car every day. I would listen to it like I would like Alanis Morissette, album, like, Jagged Little Pill. You're so talented. So
sweet.
So this is why I want to bring this up. Okay. So when I met you, you were kind of doing all that stuff. You got dropped. Then you ended up, I'm going to talk to you because you're here, figuring out like, okay, now what? Like I have all this like creative talent, and you figured out that you should maybe the record labels don't want you. By the way, did you ever figure out why they dropped you?
Yeah. Let's be honest. I was in the Sunset Sounds recording studio and Lady Gaga was there, and I had just gotten signed and she was recording Paparazzi. And I was like, I'm out of my league. Like, I was signed because Ron Fair had signed Vanessa Carlton, and I was
totally
to this guy. And like, they were phasing out of that. Like, they wanted pop, amazing singles. I don't write that kind of music. I don't sing that kind of way. I was like more in the Sheryl Crow, Natalie Merchant era.
Yep.
It was over. I had to come to terms with it. And then, as you know, I started licensing music.
Don't tell me. Don't tell
it.
Wait.
Hold on.
So because she was a Colby Calais. I always say you're like a Colby Calais. Okay, it's like the singer-songwriter. Vanessa Carlton's a great example, actually, too. Okay, so then we were kind of like getting out of that genre,
Totally.
all right? So then you're like, okay, what the hell am I going to do now? And then you saw something or heard something, and she figured out that like, okay, just because I can't do that, I'm going to then license my music to TV shows and to companies. So you started writing music for McDonald's, I remember. Grey's Anatomy.
Pretty Little Liars, Younger, Target, Walmart. It was so fun.
And you were now she went from being a starving artist making no money to now making money.
You could make a lot of money with the commercials. Yeah, there was like 75 grand per use.
how did you learn? How did you get from, okay, my career and my life is over, to then finding that opportunity? And then, by
Yeah.
the way, we're not done yet. This is just part one. And then making a business from that. Because this girl, like I said, just wait. So how did you do that?
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say that in the book I just wrote, it starts off with this like really spiritual sort of like landscape and then dives into the business and the resourcefulness, because I just want to pay homage to you. 100% we were put here to take action. 100%. We live in a physical world. You cannot just sit on a mountaintop and think that all of these things will happen. And also, you would miss out on who you become when you take action. Like, we were meant to do hard things and find that we have a bigger capacity to do things than we thought. Like, that's all in the book. It just starts off with this, like, you know what? It starts off with a lot of the spirituality. I have to say why, because my book was a version of this. And it was supposed to come out in May. And after October 7th, I actually asked my publisher if I could put more spirituality and Judaism in the book and a little less business, because everyone talks about anti-Semitism, which they should. I get it. But to me, I'm like, what about pro-Semitism? Like, these ideas are so beautiful. I'm like, I want people to know them. So yes to the business part. So how did I do that? Yes, you were right. I thought it was Beyonce or bust. You know, I had a record deal. I was like, I did it. Look, mom, take a picture. And then I got dropped. And then I actually got a second record deal with Craig Kalman at Atlantic. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be so much better. And so glad this is where I landed. And then I was supposed to write a soundtrack to Fraggle Rock. Ahmet Zappa wrote the script. Weinstein was going to do the movie. The movie never got made. And then Craig Kalman, who's like a sweet guy at Atlantic Records, like, we have no vehicle for your music. So then that ended. And then I thought, well, now it's really over. And a friend of mine said, okay, so if you're going to give up your dream, you should go make a lot of money. And so long story short, she's like, what can you do to make a lot of money? You should work in commercial real estate. And so because you and I are pretty, we're good at manifesting, like whether you like it or not, like good energy is the trick to manifestation. Like having fun wherever you are is how you manifest. So I was in line at the Cheesecake Factory and this guy was standing in front of me in Brentwood and he was like, what do you do? And I was like, actually, I'm looking for my next thing. And he's like, I own $300 million of shopping centers. You should come work for me. You have good energy. I'm like, oh, I was just thinking about commercial real estate. I went to work for this guy and I had a blast. Because you and I have a blast wherever we are. And I bought my little CLK coupe and I would like go with him to golf courses and then they'd make deals and exchange like tenancies in common. I don't even know what they were doing. They're buying pieces of shopping centers. And I was like, oh my God, people just neutrally exchange hundreds of millions of dollars. Like it's no big deal. Meanwhile, they're having fun. They're going to lunch. They're going to the opera. Like I'm in, you know? And after 2 years, I was like, you know what? I'm not in. Like, I didn't come to LA to do this. And I saw that I could be successful at it because I realized that every business, but especially real estate at that level is all people. Yeah. It's just knowing how to be good with people. And they have to diversify their asset anyway. They may as well go with you. And I was like, but this isn't my life. Like, I don't want to do this. And I was making good money, but I left. And then I asked myself a new question, which is there any other way I can make money with music? Is it record deal or nothing? And I Googled that. And these articles came up about like, you could license your music. I was like, what is that? I had never heard of that. And I saw Ingrid Michaelson was licensing her songs to an Old Navy commercial. And I was like, you know what? I should do that. And now that I've had 2 years in the real estate world, I'm going to cold call my ass off. So I start cold calling Ogilvy, Leo Burnett. And they were like, who are you? Click. And then I like have a thick skin. So I'm like, oh, okay, don't call it noon, call it 4. Like,
but wait a second. You forgot a big part of it, which I love. The first part is when you did connect with people, you said to them, I want your Starbucks order.
Oh, you remember? Yeah. So I decided. It's the gold. It's the juice.
How are you like bearing the lead?
Okay. That's in my book. Yeah. So what I decided to do is I realized like it's people skills, right? So I was like, instead of asking them to give me an opportunity to write songs for their next ad, I was like, listen, what's your favorite Starbucks drink? And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm like making it up on the spot. I'm like, I do this thing called Mochas and Music. I take your Starbucks order and then I'll bring you the Starbucks and I'll also bring you some music. This is like back when we would bring like a zip drive or something. And half the time they'd be like, no, thank you. But the other half of the time they were like, I want a caramel macchiato. Oh, can you get one for my assistant? I'm like, sure. So I went to like 50 people's offices. And sometimes I would even call like an ad agency in Minnesota because a lot of the big brands are there, like General Mills and Target. So the ad agencies there do a lot of the big spots. So I would call these ad agencies in Minnesota and be like, I'm going to be in Minneapolis. And they'd like, oh, when are you going to be here? I'm like, oh, I'm going to be there in October. And where should I go apple picking? And then I would take a trip because then I would get the meeting and I would go and then I would land the spot. And then I was like, oh my God, every one of these trips is worth it. Because if you get one song in a McDonald's commercial, they pay you $85,000 just to use it and you still own it. And then you can license it again. And then you're right. I started teaching other artists how to do that. And again, I didn't overthink that either. It was like, you and I are not, I'm not existential. It's not like, oh, is my whole life licensing music? No, you're just doing it. Is my whole life now teaching artists to license music? No, it's just another yes and. Other artists started asking me. Actually, my friends and distant cousins were living right next door to me. And they were my first people like, can you teach me how you do this? And I'm like, sure. Here's the list of people that I've now found, but you can find more of these people by Googling who's the music supervisor, da 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 da. I'll show you how to Google it. I'll show you the numbers of names I know. And then my friend was like, this is so valuable. You should teach this. And I had my first class in my living room for 10 people. And then I was like, resourceful. I should rent a theater. And I start calling around LA and people are like, yeah, we don't even use our theaters on Tuesday during the day. We only use them at night. So I'm like, okay, there'll be like some weird set behind me for the play, but like I can rent it. She's like, yeah, if you rent it during the day, weekday, it costs like nothing, like $50 an hour. Great. So I start renting theaters, filling seats. And then one of my students, now I was licensing my own music and teaching people how to license music. One of my students in one of the classes said, you should do an online class. I'm like, I don't have an online account. I don't have Instagram. She's like, but why would it only be, this is only available to people in LA? Like there's people graduating from Berklee School of Music in Boston. They might want to learn this. So I put up my first webinar. Again, didn't overthink it. I was pregnant with my third daughter. I didn't have a single slide, no slide deck. I just did what you and I did, just like told people my story and said, it's $1,000. I made that up, $1,000 and you can be in a group for a year and I'll come on Zoom once a week. And 147 people bought it that night.
How did they even know? Like this is the thing, right? Like, because I think people get they also get they stop in the start, right? Because if you don't have all these things, you don't have the Instagram, you don't have this, you don't know people, right? I know. How do you get people?
Because you use this word, and I think this should be our like buzzword, is resourceful. So you know what I did? I thought to myself, who knows songwriters? And I'm like, where do songwriters hang out? And then I thought, oh, you know who knows songwriters? The guy who books Hotel Cafe, the guy who books what used to be Room 5. These were songwriter places. So I called James at Hotel Cafe. I'm like, how long is your email list of songwriters? Because he'd been booking there for years. He's like, it's like at least a few thousand. I said, why don't you send them this email that I'm going to do this thing? It's a free workshop. So he's like, okay. Like we weren't even smart enough to like give him an affiliate. I didn't even know that at the time. He was just like, sure. And then because he was a songwriter, he wanted to come to it. And then the deal that we made, he was like, can I just be in your class for free? I'm like, sure. But after that, I said, why don't I give you like a cut if you send people? And then I did that. And then the next thing I did was like,
but this is called hustle, darling.
I was just what I was doing was just having fun and not overthinking it.
See, exactly. And so what I think that like people now are really kind of creating this there's like a whole movement like, oh, the word hustle is a bad word.
Yeah, they don't know what it means.
Because yeah, exactly. It's like you can't, no matter how much people now the new buzzword is manifesting or sitting back, whatever the word is of the day. I don't care. It all comes back to you still have to like get out of the chair
100%
and do the work.
Show up and do the work 100%. You know, I was thinking my grandmother was a dancer. That's how she met my grandfather, and he danced with Gregory Hines' dad, and they used to do the hustle. It was a dance.
Yeah.
But what I just realized is the hustle can be fun, meaning to say that is how it should be. Like, I think the reason people don't like it is because they're not as much like us, where so when they do it, they feel they have to do it perfectly. They have to overthink it. They have to be, over preparing, and then they feel really rejected when something doesn't work. I think you and I are like, I don't even notice if someone rejects me.
I don't.
I'm just like, fine, on to the next one. And then it's actually fun because I don't overthink, I don't overplan. So to me, the hustle is more like my grandmother and grandfather dancing.
You know, it's so funny that you say that, because that's the one question people, especially when I wrote my book and when I'm doing the whole circuit, like the podcast and all that, always people would say to me like, well, how are you okay with rejection or failure? I'm like, I did it so much and I failed so many times that like I became desensitized and immune to the feeling, or it didn't even like make a difference.
Don't even notice.
Like,
honestly, here's part of what I say to people is this. I'm okay if people decide not to like me. Isn't that insane? Because guess what? I don't like everybody.
Yeah.
I don't. Like, how many times you go to a party and you're like, oh, all these people, these are my people. No, there's like 4 girls. You're like, I love these girls. The other one, nah, not so much. Like, I think it's weird that we think everyone's supposed to like us.
Totally true.
People should reject you because you're not everyone's cup of tea. Oh my God, can you handle that? And also, why would you take it personally? People are so busy with their own self and their own life, they sometimes can't get back to you or they sometimes can't help you. Let it go. I'm like, I find it a little narcissistic how people want other people's approval. I really don't.
I don't
I
either.
don't need it. I'm really okay.
I know.
Like,
But I wonder why that is. Like, why are we okay with that and other people are not? Like,
a good question.
what is the reason behind it? Because the truth is, like, I feel like people are like, she doesn't give a shit. She's so, and it's not, I feel like I don't.
I don't
and
either.
people ask me why. And I'm
I
like,
don't know.
I don't know.
I wonder, I don't know. I'm thinking, what do we have in common? But like my parents got divorced when I was younger. I was making, like, if I missed an orthodontist appointment, like I had to call. Like I knew how to talk to adults. I was a little bit older than my peers in a way, and my dad left, and so it was on me. I didn't, I guess maybe on some level, that's like the ultimate rejection, and I didn't even take that way.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if I don't take that way, I'm gonna be fine. I don't care. Like, I don't care. Let him go do his thing.
Yeah,
like,
that's so
it was.
funny.
I was relieved when he left.
Oh
it
my
was a
God.
toxic mess when he was there.
Really?
Yeah, my parents fought all the time. So then when they got divorced, I was like, thank God you got divorced.
How
like,
old were you when they got divorced?
well, my dad lived a double life for a while, which was really gross because he would tell me about these sexual things he got to do with this new one when I'm like 12. But then he eventually left when I was 14.
Wait, so he was telling you about his double life?
It's gross.
Did you tell your mom?
I mean, yeah. And then she would try not to know that I was telling the truth to keep herself from leaving. Like it was so lame. And also, I think because my mom was so crippled with depression, I was like, that will never be me. I was like, you deserved to live your life and to bloom. And instead, you let this guy like totally walk all over you and then left you. I'm like, I'm not going to do that.
See, it's what I find so interesting why you say the story is it can go either way, right?
Yeah.
You took you did like a balls to the wall type of approach.
Let's go.
And right. And like you didn't let it penetrate to the point where you became debilitated.
No.
And you didn't like sit and ruminate on trauma. And I think this is the big problem we have in today's culture.
By the way, you're right. I seriously agree with you. I'm like, why would you keep going back into something? And I'm speaking, I know, I'm sure you're friendly and connected to her, Dr. Edith Eger. I'm going this weekend to like this event to speak at her event.
No, I don't know who she is.
She's a Holocaust survivor. She wrote the book called The Gift and the Choice, like super bestseller books. And she's also a therapist. She was like, being a survivor, right? She's a Holocaust survivor, but she's also like a therapist. She's like, being a survivor is like everything from the past just turns to wisdom. And you survive by living your best freaking life. Like that's what you do is you're saying, I will not eat this poison again and again. Because when you go back into old memories, your body thinks it's happening again. And it's like, instead, why don't you create a good, amazing moment right now? Like I've always kind of been like that though. Like since I was a little girl, I was just like, there's so much to enjoy. Why are you guys like just sitting in the sadness? There's so much more here.
Because that's what I was, what my point that I wanted to make was, and like I said, I'm a big believer. That's why you and I get along very well, is not to sit and ruminate and talk about your problems day in and day out. People are
God.
using therapy now, and I'm going to probably get a ton of shit for saying this, but as like a crutch, it becomes like their new hobby is just to go to therapy over and over again to talk about the same problem they had many years ago, when it's been proven and shown that that rumination is actually a major reason for all this mental health decline. And so why is it though that some people are doing it that way while other ones are like you? Like, because you have a sister, obviously, is she older or younger?
Older.
Older. Did she take the same approach as you?
Yes and no. We're different. We
Very
live
different.
lives. But I think what you just said is like one of the reasons I actually love going on like a week-long meditation retreat. Like I've been with Dr. Joe Dispenza maybe 4 times on a retreat. And one reason I really love it is because you're not there to go back into your past and in your story. What you're actually doing is going to the truth of this present moment where you are bigger than your past. and you find within you like your capacity for passion and creativity and to see further. It's really interesting. I have friends who do mushrooms, okay,
Yeah, of course.
psilocybin, and they love it.
Yeah.
And when I was with Dr. Joe at the last retreat, he showed us what psilocybin does to the brain. It shuts off the amygdala, which is where you sit in the past in your trauma,
Yeah.
and opens up the third eye because it's a serotonin enhancer. And then you feel joy, right? But what he shared with us is you can create that experience by just getting out of the past, right? And stop projecting the past onto the present moment and actually go beyond time to where you really are, the part of you that is actually available for a greater possibility, right? Like I say in the book, people either live from probability, which is really just called the past, what evidence they have of the past, or possibility, which is in the present moment, what is possible, right? And I think this is interesting research based on what we just were saying. We know this, you live this. Grit got a whole lot of attention with Angela Duckworth's book. And what I found fascinating when she says gritty people are the most successful, she says what makes a person gritty is optimism. Because in order to be in the science lab again and again and again and have the resilience to find a cure for cancer, you can't say, oh my gosh, I'm so upset I didn't find it yesterday. You have to be like, I know it's here. It's here. It's coming. It's here. So this is what you just said. Think about this.
Yeah.
If the most successful people have grit, and if the only thing that they can show that actually correlates to grit is optimism, then that is a person living in possibility, living in the what's possible in the future, in here, in the present moment, rather than going back into the story of what already was. So, people might not like it, or there might be other things. Of course, you and I can get a lot of things wrong, and we don't know the full scope of why people go to therapy, and maybe some of it is really beautiful and helpful and all that. But I went to therapy for years, and I would say, based on what Angela Duckworth is saying, at some point, if you want to be, when she says successful, she doesn't just mean like having followers on Instagram.
Yeah,
she means a life that feels fulfilling and where you're walking in your potential and everything feels good to you, right? That's success, fulfillment, right? Then optimism has to be something, and that is a discipline. My grandmother used to say, it's easy to find the bad. You have to look for the good. And I think that's what this is. In fact, I write about her in the book because she was born in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, lost her family in the pogroms, and they had no money, lived in a tenement, and her mother died really young. And yet my grandmother told me they had no money. So in order to go to a dance club, because she was a dancer, she would take an eyeliner pencil and draw a line up the back of her leg because you could only get in with stockings, but she couldn't afford the stockings. And the eyeliner pencil made it look like she had stockings on. And then she didn't go to school past the 5th grade. And she had a note on her shirt one day that said, this child suffers from malnutrition, because the school said to her parents, she had nothing. And yet she would go to the library and she would read and she would go to this dance hall. In fact, you would think this is cute. It was a restricted club to Jews. Jews couldn't dance there. So she said she was Italian because she had like dark hair and dark skin. She met my grandfather there and they started becoming dance partners. And she's like, oh, he's Italian. And he went by Benedito, even though his name was Baruch. He used an Italian version of that name to get into the club, but they were the two best dancers. And one day he walked her home and they were sitting on the stoop and she said, I can't date you, but I'm in love with you, but I'm Jewish. And he said, I'm Jewish. And I say that because I think my grandmother lives in me. I think her optimism, like with all the crap that's going on around me, I'm going to go dance. I'm going to find the music. Like her siblings didn't necessarily do that. Her siblings were like trapped in depression. Their mom had died. They came from the pogroms. They lost their family in the Holocaust. This is before the Holocaust, but they lost their family to other versions of the Holocaust, which were happening in Eastern Europe, which is why 3 million Jews were killed in what is now the Ukraine, which is why so many came here. It was like a horrible time. And her mom died of tuberculosis and they had no money. Like it was so easy to say, here's all the trauma. And she used to say to me, always find the music, always dance. And why would you rob yourself of like what's possible in this moment and just keep looking at the past? And I think you and I, we're too excited about what's going to be possible today. I don't want to really focus on where I once was because I want to be here with you in this moment.
Wow.
I know. She's just a rock star.
That's amazing. I like that whole idea of the pencil bit. That's
I
really
know.
smart.
Yeah.
You are such a good orator. That is
So are
not,
you.
no, you are really.
Thank
We
you.
can
No,
go on.
no.
You are. You are. No, but okay, wait. I've got so many questions for you, but okay. When I was reading through your book, I mean, although I just got the hard copy, but I was reading the PDF. When I was going through it, I saw something that I thought was very true. You were talking about when you ask people, because now Cathy also has these, she does like, what do you call these groups, these courses, these masterminds?
Courses. Oh my God. I started doing courses in 2017, like every 3 months for like 500 people. And
she's making like millions of dollars, you guys. Like this
it's
girl's
really
like,
it's fun.
You got to teach me how to make to do a course. I swear. I think I'm
yesterday.
Okay.
You should be doing that.
I don't do
oh
courses.
my God. We need a deep dive. No, because it's so much more than a course. Courses, it's just like anything else. People use the internet for either lame things or cool things. So somebody can have an Instagram account that's very like lame and someone else can put a lot of value there. Your course doesn't need to be like a dumb course. It's going to be a program. It's going to transform people's lives.
We're going to
talk about that.
Okay, this could be the second.
That's part 2 of my direction.
The first was a podcast, and now it's the courses. But what you said was so interesting. I think this is very true because you're like when you say to people when they start or when you do your work with all these women, mostly women. I would say it's 100% women, mostly like women. It's like 99.99% women,
and then one guy.
Yeah. That what do you like if you could have anything, or what would you do? Like they'll say, oh, they want a better body or they want this or that, but the idea of them making a ton of money never even occurs to them.
It's so gross. I'm so allergic to this because this is again, one thing I love about Jewish wisdom.
Yeah.
Is the way I've learned how we don't have to choose, right? King David was one of the most spiritually evolved people. He wrote all those Psalms. As I walk through the valley of a shadow, people are still singing these words. And yet he ran an empire. Like forget Kardashian wealth. Like King David had more money than Kris Jenner, okay?
Really? Are you sure about that? Have you seen her bank account?
Maybe not, but you have to add inflation. But he could be both.
Yeah.
And the word currency comes from the word current, which means on behalf of the world. When you get money in, it immediately is helping the world. Like, what do you put it under your pillow? No, you put it in a bank. So immediately by you making money, you're thriving. So now your money is paying off people's loans and credit cards. Like if you improve your house and you paint your house and you have money, your neighbor's house just went up in value. Like, why would you not allow yourself to say with a big declaration, because I say this in the book and you know this is like your world. I say, if you decided that you want to be healthy, would you declare that to your friends at like a dinner? Would you post on social media like, I've decided this is my healthy era. Let's go. I'm going to be healthy AF. And they're like, yeah, I would totally do that. I'm like, great. You should do that. Would you declare to your friends and to your world and on social media, like you want to be the wealthiest version of you? And like, oh, I would never do that. I'm like, why the stigma? Honestly,
that's
it's
my question.
Gross. It's not good. It's because we've been taught such scarcity mindset that if I have money, I'm somehow taking it from you. That's not true. If I open a store on Main Street because I have money, I just created more opportunities for other people to create stores on Main Street. The Talmud says like this. The Talmud says that money is like rain falling in a garden. It's an activator. This is really important because we have so much in our culture that tells us the more money you have, the more evil you become. That's a lie. You could make a list right now of people who have money who are horrible and people who have money who are amazing, whose names are on the sides of hospitals and theaters and everything. And you can make a list of people who have no money who are shitty people. And you can make a list of people who have no money who are awesome and kind. So the Talmud says it's an activator of what is. So the Talmud says if money is like rain and rain falls on weeds, more weeds grow. If money is like rain and rain falls on the flowers, more flowers will grow. So that means if a person is blessed to have money and they're out of integrity, they'll do more out of integrity with it. But if a person is in integrity and they've given more money, they'll just do more good with it.
Well, I think I'll say it in a simpler way, which is more that whatever you are, whatever it is, whoever you are, it will be it'll be just exacerbated.
That's what I'm saying.
If you're a dick before, you'll be even a bigger dick.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
If you were a nice person, you'll be even a nice, you'll be even more nice. It's the same thing.
But women have a hard time. Like we've been raised, little boys, whether we know it or not. Now I'm generalizing, but it's the truth. Like by and large, boys are raised like you will be a provider when you grow up,
Yeah.
and you're going to own it. Girls are raised like you will be codependent. What I mean is you will people please your way through life, make sure everyone's comfortable all the time, right? And set yourself on fire if you have to make sure, because that's your job. You're responsible for everyone's feelings. No, like that's insane.
Well, it's also been very much about, especially, I think it's kind of come full circle now, where we had like an era where like women could like, they could be bosses, girl boss, all these, silly names. And now it's actually like there's a big movement with masculinity versus femininity with social media, that like if you're somebody who wants to be a quote unquote boss as a woman, then it's a very masculine energy, and this becomes exactly the thing, right?
And it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
There's a lot of potency to alignment, right? And so if a woman decides like she wants to have a business and whatever, she might be able, like I've been doing this work that I've been doing, working part-time and picking my kids up at 3:00 because I wanted to. I went through IVF. I want to be with my kids, like each one, right? So
yeah,
I think when you focus on the right things in business, I don't know that I can claim Tim Ferriss that I do that, a 4-hour work week. I don't. But I work 20 hours a week. What I mean to say is you don't have to do it just because someone else did it that way.
right.
I think there is a way for you to bring more ease and joy and play into it, because business at the end of the day, we know this, it's not a numbers game, it is a people's game. And your greatest strategy in a business is your identity. What energy, what you put in the world, how you hold yourself, the way you talk to people, the doors that will open for you from that. That's your first strategy. Your second strategy is, like Seth Godin would say, do you have radical empathy? Are you listening? Because if you're nailing it with a client or a customer, you've factored in what works for them. That's healthy. A business is basically a relationship at scale. You're good at reading the room, and you're also good at having the confidence to be a leader. Like so many women are like, I'm afraid to start a business because why? Well, because then I feel responsible for getting it all right. No, really good leaders don't have all the answers, but they lead their way through it. Like really good leaders in a business, in a family, you don't know what's coming around the bend. You can't be perfect, but you have the accountability to say like, all right, I'll figure it out. I'll ask good questions. I'll be resourceful. It goes back to that.
It goes back to I think, and also the quote, you also love it. Our greatest resource is our resourcefulness. Right. And it's 100% true.
Exactly. So I think that's what keeps people, is this feeling of like, I couldn't do it unless I could do it the way someone else does it, or I could do it perfectly. It's like, it's not required. What's required is like, have the confidence to know that you've been preparing to be you every day of your life. It's enough. A lot of women, I think you and I also have this in common. For some reason along the way, we decided to give ourselves the permission. We didn't wait for someone to give us permission. And so that's huge. Like, who gave Oprah permission? Not that she's even but like, she gave it to herself.
100%.
Right? At some point, that's got to happen. It's like, I think the two biggest lies in the brain, which is mostly lying to you anyway, is I'm not enough and it's not possible anyway. And the truth is, who says anyone's enough to do anything?
Well, no, though, like this is a big pillar point for me, right? This whole I'm not enough thing. Because I think we always over-index what someone else is. Like, they're there because they're so great and phenomenal and talented and skilled. Right. And we under-index what we can do.
Totally.
That's just human nature, right? When the truth is that, and by the way, and I can say this because I meet everybody like you, and then you meet these people who are so extraordinary and wonderful, and you're like, oh, they must be this, this, and the other. And you meet them, you're like, they're not what that they're not that great.
Oh my God.
The only difference between that person and the other person is that they like believed in themselves just a little bit more and like kept on going and kept on trying.
I mean, I will not name names because it would be so disgusting, although it'd be fun. But the amount of people that I know who are like made it people, who are like at the top of their game, who are literally weeping and feel dead inside, is shocking, honestly. Because I think why I go back to this idea of the law of reception and all of that jibber jabber, because in a way it's like all we do is like blather as people. It's like, just you're either like being real or you're not. But I think the real part of that is I'm very impatient. So for me, I want to have fun every step of the way, which means I'm not going to try to be perfect. I'm going to know that I can think on my feet and be resourceful. And I'm going to like myself enough to give myself permission to show up.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, then if you get to the top of the mountain with some goal, it doesn't matter if you hit the New York Times list. You just had fun the whole time. That's what I'm saying. That's what I mean. That people, I want to give you a good example. When I started my podcast, I went to Podcast Movement and I'm like, okay, I'm here. And everyone had business cards. And I'm like, oh, I don't have business cards because I'm never prepared and I forget. So walking around, everybody had very schmoozy energy, which you and I were just talking before. Like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't need to be in that room. So I'm like, when does this end? Okay, it ends in an hour. I was like, I'm going to leave. I'll come back when like the panel starts and the content starts. So I leave, completely leave the event for the networking, go to another hotel. And I said to my friend before I left, I'm going to leave. She's like, you don't want to stay? You could meet the head of Apple Podcasts. You could meet Spotify. They're here. I'm like, oh my God, I can't. Like, I just need to be, no, these people are just too, yeah. So it was inauthentic to me. So I go to another hotel. I ordered a nice tea. I sat down. All of a sudden I felt fine again. I'm like, oh my God, that energy of like, you know, that's
Totally get- I get
trying
it.
to get something. I just can't do it. So I sit there. This man sits down next to me. He's wearing the same badge I was wearing. And I'm like, were you in there? He's like, I hate that energy. I'm like, me too. So we start talking. He's from Chicago. We talk about the Midwest. He's really interesting. We talk about the last good book we read. And then he gets up. It's like 45 minutes later. And he's like, I'm going to go back in there. I'm going to meet you. He hands me his card. He was the head of Apple Podcast.
I love that.
He is now such a good friend of mine. And of course, he then featured me on Apple. Of course, he then took me to New York to the podcast upfronts. And then, yeah, a lot of good shit happened. But my point is, I know it sounds woo, but when you every moment, instead of thinking someone has the power that you don't, keep choosing yourself, you already won. Even if he didn't walk in, even if I didn't get featured on Apple, even if Steve and I never had become friends, it wouldn't matter. It just wouldn't matter. What mattered is that I knew enough to say, this is me losing my power all of a sudden, trying to meet the right person who can do it for me. No one can do it for you. That's what I'm saying.
I'm clipping that. How long is that? Because that's going to be the longest clip ever.
5 minutes.
It's what? 5 minutes? Damn. Okay, well, I'm going to try to clip it because that is such a great story, Cathy. And like, this is what I'm saying. Like, you have good energy because you bring it. Like, you are so passionate and you can feel it. It's true. Like you're saying, like, to wrap it all up, the truth is, like, you can feel the authenticity. Like, you're not bullshit. You're not sitting there bullshitting it. Like, this is like who you are. Like, it is. And that's why so many women love you and come to you for these courses or whatever you want to call them, these
Programs,
programs,
yeah.
because like it's infectious. Like you give people, you make people feel like they actually have the power.
We do have the power. And
You
to
know?
wrap it up, the way I wrapped up what's in this book at the end, I was like, how am I going to close this book? And I think you'll appreciate this. I may have even shared this with you. Esther Youngrice, who's another Holocaust survivor, was such a powerhouse, like
Wow.
just amazing. She used to speak, I think, on the Upper West Side once a week. I think 1,000 people would come to the synagogue to hear her. She was incredible. And she said to me something just magnificent. She said her favorite prayer in all of Judaism is that in the morning blessings, which admittedly I don't do them, but I have seen this in the
Okay.
Siddur, so I know it's true. There's a prayer to be like a rooster. And she said, it's her favorite prayer. And she said when she was in a concentration camp, before she parted ways with her family, her father said, never forget that prayer. I mean, it makes me cry. Be like a rooster. So there she was in a concentration camp, her head shaved. Be like a rooster. Be like a rooster. She didn't really know what that meant. And years later, get this, she was called, George W. Bush was president. He was going to Yad Vashem, which is a Holocaust museum, for those who don't know, in Jerusalem. He invited her to be his guest. So she gets on Air Force One. They go to Jerusalem and they have a great time. And they're flying back on Air Force One and she fell asleep and she woke. Well, he tapped her on the shoulder and he said, do you know where you are? And she's like, no. And he said, you're flying over Germany in Air Force One, coming from the state of Israel to America. He said, I had to have that moment with you. And she said, that is exactly when I knew why we pray to be like a rooster. That was the moment, she said, because the rooster, this is so powerful. The rooster is the first one on the farm who knows just when it looks like the Night cannot get any darker. The exact second it's the darkest, that's the second the rooster crows and says the light is about to break. You see the light? It got as dark as it could go, so that's how you know it's time to wake up, because the light is here, because the dawn is here. Jen, that is everything we basically just talked about, is that I feel like I won the DNA freaking lottery because my grandparents and their grandparents, and by the way, everyone has this capacity. Don't have to be Jewish, don't have to be Buddhist. We all have the ability to be like a rooster. That's what we just talked about. No matter how you slice it, it's no matter where you are. The first question, one of the first questions, how do you change your energy? Be like a rooster. No matter what you've seen, no matter what you see at any moment, that's just the beginning of the story. The darkness is just the beginning. The light's around the corner, and you have the capacity to bring that light and to bring that to other people. And that's why we're all here, for that.
I'm clipping that too. Cathy. Okay. Guys, the book is called Abundant Ever After. You are incredible. You really are. You are a light. You're you have
You're so
you are an inspiration. You are like you walk the walk, you talk the talk. Cathy, where do people, okay, everyone buy the book, that's obvious, but where can they follow you on Instagram?
You can follow me on Instagram.
Listen to her podcast if you haven't. If you're one of the 45 million or so.
You can find the book at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, and then once you buy the book, we have all these really fun bonuses. Like you get a journal and you get affirmation decks, and there's a course that I teach on sort of like a guide to the book, and you can get all of that if you go to cathyheller.com/book, and then you can get all your bonuses. One last thing I wanted to say, because we were talking about spirituality and we were also talking about doing, like taking action. I find it really interesting. When I graduated from college, I wrote a paper comparing Moses and the Buddha, Siddhartha. And I thought it was really an interesting comparison because they both grew up in a palace, okay, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
They both grew up as a prince, and then they both went into the wilderness. Except what I think is interesting, and this is just a matter of like observation. It doesn't mean one is right or wrong. I think it's beautiful to be Buddhist. It's beautiful to be Jewish. It's just interesting to me. I like the fact that I think the idea in Buddhism is to really get into a state of peace, which I think they believe could then really affect the world, which you're probably right. I mean, who are we kidding? If people walked around in a state of inner peace and well-being, that'd be a really good thing.
Totally.
But what I like about Judaism for me is that one day a week we rest. We have the Sabbath, which is just similar to that whole idea of being at peace. But 6 days a week, God says, go out and make the world better. Go use your gifts because you're needed to contribute something and build something because you have something. I'm telling you, you're needed to help create and build this world. And I find that really fulfilling. Like I really do. Like I find it really satisfying to go out and to be a part of helping to create and to build things. So I think the balance of one day a week being with what is and having equanimity, and 6 days a week being out in the world and trying to take the right action to make the world better, I think that that's a really nice thing to keep in mind.
I love that.